This is Claire Kappel, and this is my oral final exam for EPSI 7210. Two of the course objectives I feel like I met during this course. The first one is recognize prejudice and oppressive institutional structures in education that marginalize gifted students from culturally diverse backgrounds, specifically race, class, gender, and language issues. While I feel like I have, before taking this course, been able to recognize a lot of these institutional structures, there are some more related to education specifically that I don't think I was aware of. One of the readings, for example, about the U46 case, that really opened my eyes to how programs can segregate students based on their cultural differences. And while I do not currently see that where I work, I do know of places that implement special programs, and now I have the experience sort of to take a second look at these programs and to see what their goal really is, and how and to see if multicultural students are being served in a fair and equitable way. I also appreciated getting to learn about Boykin's Afrocentric styles. While those are some concepts I've had clearly laid out in my head before as I've been teaching, having a laid out piece of research that demonstrates exactly what these behaviors are and how they can be used positively in the classroom, that was very helpful, because these are things that I deal with day in and day out as a teacher. We want our students to come in and do what they're supposed to do, but when they don't, we need to either take a step back and look at ourselves and see what's going on with us, or maybe what's going on with that student, or maybe both. And I think learning about those Afrocentric styles did help me place some of those behaviors that teachers traditionally don't want to see in the classroom. I have a new perspective on some of these things, and I think that Boykin's research really did help with that. The second objective is understand the role of multiculturalism in addressing patterns of achievement and underachievement among underrepresented populations of gifted students. So two other readings that discussed underrepresented population. Catano discussed students in poverty, and Sadker discussed gender issues with gifted students. There are many reasons throughout, schooling why either boys will underachieve or girls will underachieve, and those change as time goes on. Earlier on, we see some underachieving boys, and later on, we see a huge increase in underachievement in girls. And Sadker offers up many strategies that teachers can use to ensure that they're not creating more gender bias within their own classrooms. Catano's 2003 paper on students in poverty was also very useful. When we have students in poverty, when you see pieces of information like a student in poverty hears 30 million fewer words before an affluent student hears before the age of 5 when they enter kindergarten. These are very tangible reasons for why students in poverty underperform. It starts from the very beginning, and their intelligence is misunderstood. And so those readings by Catano and Sadker really helped establish for me some beliefs and strategies that'll help me use multiculturalism in the classroom and not overlook those students who may be underachieving or underidentified. Also, conducting and both listening to the courageous conversations also helped me achieve these two objectives. I really appreciated hearing everybody's personal experiences with racial and gender discrimination. It was interesting for me, working in Georgia, to hear how all of these things manifest themselves in Georgia specifically. We work in communities and want to do the best for our community, and it was fascinating to hear what's going on, in and around the Atlanta area and some people in Savannah. It was very interesting to see how all of these issues play out in this state and in different metropolitan areas. Lastly, I really feel like I benefited from the discussions. Again, everybody's personal experience really contributed to the course content as a whole. One of the discussions I particularly enjoyed was the one about the equity index. When I looked at my school, I realized my school is pretty well on track for having equal representation, and they even have slightly overrepresentation for certain groups, non-white groups. However, the district and the state, not so much. Their equity index, they're not quite where they need to be with identification. And along with that discussion, I also went back and looked at my high school's equity index and to see how they were doing, because I recall my high school experience being very balanced and diverse, but looking at this number would give me more of a statistical true picture. So I did go look back and I calculated the equity index for my high school, and they're doing pretty well. The white students are slightly overrepresented. However, for the state of Louisiana as a whole, this school was doing pretty well in equitable identification. Okay, now I'll move on to some of the areas of growth that I feel like I could still continue to work on. For this upcoming school year, I do want to work more closely with the school's gifted and talented liaison to ensure students are A, being identified appropriately, and B, not being removed from the program without appropriate interventions. She was originally the only gifted certified teacher, and when I entered the school, I was the second gifted certified teacher, and now this year I'll be finishing up with the master's in gifted education. So I feel like I have a little bit more to offer than I originally did. Some of the teachers at our school, if the gifted students in their class are misbehaving or not performing well, they wanted the students to be kicked out of the gifted program. They say they don't belong here, they're not doing their job, they shouldn't, get these services. And so I think part of my job will be to help evaluate what's really going on with those students, were they appropriately identified to begin with, but also what's going on right now that we once thought they were gifted and now these teachers feel like they are not and are undeserving. There's clearly something going on there. So that's something I would like to work on for this year. Secondly, I want to incorporate more authentic multicultural elements into the Georgia Studies curriculum. The second half of the curriculum doesn't do too bad of a job with incorporating multiple perspectives and stories. However, the first half is very white. There's a lot of, exploration and establishing the colony of Georgia. And, we mentioned one Native American who helps them out, but that's about it. So I want to make sure I incorporate more stories and perspectives of Native Americans and slaves. And I understand that if those materials don't exist, I may need to be the one who creates those materials. And that's something I'd like to work on this year. And lastly, the school I work at doesn't have a ton of parent involvement. And sometimes we see that as a blessing. However, I recognize it as my job to communicate with parents, especially parents of gifted students who don't commonly reach out. Sometimes those students are having struggles that their parents are unaware of, and they assume their students are doing just fine, and they must be fine because they're in the gifted program and they'll be fine. But it's my job to make sure that those parents are aware of what's going on and are also aware of the social and emotional issues that may come along with being a gifted student. This community doesn't quite recognize the social and emotional side of many of these students' backgrounds, and so I believe with the education experience I've had through this master's program and through this course, I can better communicate and explain some of these issues. Some of the individuals I'd like to work with, going forward, absolutely my fellow teachers. The collaboration at my school has really been lacking, and I think with some of the information and experience that we all have, we have so much to offer each other, but most of us are so worried about, how much time we have available and having our planning period, but we really need to improve our collaboration, and we can offer each other some of this information that we may be missing. Also, I'd like to better utilize programs like STEM programs, and there's a program in Georgia called STEM Wars, the Reading Bowl, and other science and social studies fairs. These organizations that put on these projects for students have lots of information available about how to get students to use those higher order thinking skills and think creatively and go ahead and stretch their mind and do something that's slightly out of their comfort zone. And that's what we need to be doing with our gifted students. And I think these project-based things, some students do them and just get them out of the way to check something off the list. But if teachers really sell these projects and ideas, students can embrace them and use skills that they're generally not using every day in the classroom. And lastly, instead of trying to recreate the wheel, the National Association of Gifted Children has countless resources for gifted students, parents of gifted students, teachers of gifted students, all of the above. And they also have webinars that we could use in our schools to do professional development or to show parents at an open house. And this group also has, conferences around the country that would be a great resource for gifted teachers. When students have teachers who are open and willing to collaborate and use new ideas and go ahead and try some challenging things in their classroom, like these programs mentioned, and also be willing to go to conferences, learn more about their field and their skills, and be open to having a new understanding of gifted students and their multicultural students. I truly believe that students will grow from having teachers so involved in organizations and with each other. And for all of our multicultural students to be successful, we need the entire school on board. And so I think as educators, what's most important is to continue to educate ourselves on these issues and to do our best to grow. We need to do the research. We need to self-evaluate ourselves in the classroom. We need to do action research to see if our methods are working. We need to take a step out there and go do these new projects and experiences that maybe we haven't had before. We need to do this for our students so that they know that we care and we are trying to create the best education possible for them.